We need to think about like other ways of pulling in revenue that doesn't involve us to either hire more people or rent more space all the time. And so hybrid is one of the ways to do it. So if you don't have a motto of care, create your motto of care like right now, because regardless, you have to have your motto of care as a business. That's number one. And second is if you do want to go into hybrid, definitely do it. And you know what? When people are creating programs, and this is a hybrid or online or whatever, right? I think most of the time is they put in too much, like right there and then. They put in too much and it's actually not digestible content, or especially a health professional. Sometimes they put in content that is just theory based and it doesn't really link to why people need to do that.
Hey coach, Xenia Wood here, and this is the Swift Coaches Academy podcast, created for service-based business owners who are ambitious enough to break free from the forever hustle and create scalable businesses that truly make an impact while also giving us freedom. With more than a decade of experience, we're not here to waste your time on theory. Instead, just sharing what works and what doesn't to help you get clear as fuck on your next move and show you exactly how to implement the systems and strategies that you need to scale with confidence. Welcome back to Swift Coaches Academy. I'm so excited for our guest today, Winnie Wu. When we first met, I immediately clicked with her because we're both very like no BS, practical-based business strategists. And I love that Winnie's point of difference is focusing on female-led allied health clinics. So I think we complement each other really well, while me being more focused on the online space and transitioning there, but we have similar methodologies. Winnie's also a director of 2 physio and women's health clinics with a team of 30 in Sydney and a mum of 2. I don't know how she does it. But by founding and growing 3 allied health clinics to 7 figures in 18 months, which I just find is wild. So one of the most impressive things I think about Winnie, and what I'm excited about for today's episode, is that she helps clinic owners achieve 40 to 45% profit margins while expanding their teams and stepping back from the daily grind at the same time. Oh, tongue twister. Winnie, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast, Anya.
Oh, my pleasure. I love that, we connected, and you're now a best-selling author, and that's how I found you, through the book launch, which
I know it was, it was still, I still have to sort of step back and realize sort of what I've done over the last year. But yeah, I'm so glad to like meet you in the book launch. It was good to meet someone else who's also working in the same space, but in a different way, and that we contribute to like health professionals and PTs in different ways, which is really great.
Totally. And we were just saying before we started off air that you two are starting a podcast next year.
Yes, yeah, I am. I just thought of a name and I just submitted it to Spotify. But yes, it will. I will launch it very, very soon. I'm
Do we
keeping
get
everything.
that exclusive preview of the name, or do we have to wait?
It is actually, yeah, I'm still thinking about it, but then 80% is going to be called the Scalable Clinic podcast. That's it. Very simple. Yeah.
Perfect. I love that. I think, using things from a marketing perspective, like making it search terms, I feel like that's similar to why when I created Swift Movement Academy, I was like, I need movement in the name because that's like our philosophy and what we're about. And if people are searching for that. So totally, totally get it from that perspective. That's awesome.
That's very interesting because movement is also one of my businesses called Movement Laboratory. And movement is such a big part of the philosophy of that business as well. So yeah.
We're very similar, very similar. That's awesome.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I think would be beneficial to for me to learn from you, and then obviously those listening as well. But I think one of the things that stood out to me when we were speaking when we first met was our similar philosophies on having a framework or a methodology, or like I sort of call it like a signature system that you develop and then use to, I guess, impart on your staff and your clients so that everyone's following the same thing. And it also helps clients sort of pave a pathway for their progress with working with you. What I'd love to know is like, what your specific methodology is when it comes to working, like let's say you're working with a clinic right now and they kind of do their services but they don't have a methodology. How do you go about crafting that with them?
Yeah. So I call it a model of care. Yeah, or a signature model of care. Yeah. And it is really the framework for how you work with patients. So I'm going to use patients and clients really loosely in here because I'm normally in our scenario as patients. Um, what you want to do is make sure that it's not a clinical guideline. It's not a clinical protocol. Like, so for example, if you go into like physiotherapy, for example, there are clinical guidelines for how to rehab ACL, how to do like this and that. And these are like published national guidelines based on a lot of research. And I think a lot of people get confused between a clinical guideline versus your own framework of how to approach health and patients in general. Yeah. So as a business or a brand, do you think you need to have your own model of care and your own methodology, which is unique to you? Yeah. It might be exactly the same thing as what the other physio is doing, but the communication is different. And when we want to think about it, I like it to be illustrated in a diagram. So not just words, because people don't resonate with much as just words. And so it has to be like, maybe it's a 4-step or a 5-step um, sort of model of care. And how to start is actually thinking about your patient journey. So if you question how patients do come to you in the first place, like how they discover you, and then what you're going to do to lead them through the journey of recovery and then discharge, like what does the whole journey looks like? And can you divide that into different steps where you can name those steps and have a solid outcome related to those steps? That is the first way to start thinking about it. Okay. Um, and the thing is, I would always focus on the start part of it more than the end part of it. So, for example, a lot of clinicians then go into like this model of going deep diving into the rehab model, but actually, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like just the steps of, okay, maybe the first step is investigation, finding the root cause. Yeah. And then what is the outcome of that? The outcome is getting really good clarity on the treatment plan. Yeah. And making sure that you have 100% like discover everything behind it. And the second step could be, whatever. So for example, in our clinic, we do the second step is um, manual therapy and focusing on like mobility and joint issues and stuff like that. Yeah. So the outcome is so that we can return your body to like a blank canvas. And the third step is in putting in like movement stuff in there. And then it continues in there, but then it has to be um, like a framework that you can prime patients so they know what to expect when they come through. Yeah. So that is like how I start to sort of think about this.
Interesting. And I find, getting it sounds like almost more detailed upfront, and then I would assume it, like, expands out and maybe becomes a little more looser depending on the condition or whatever, but they still follow the same principles. Is that right?
Yeah. It's like your recovery rehab principles, which should be able to apply to most conditions in your clinic. Because you don't want to have like one framework for like all these conditions and then another framework for these conditions. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And so, the focus here, if we're going to create our own model of care, would be like figure out the steps when someone comes to you. So you're saying investigation, and then for you it's manual therapy, and then it may be like movement or mobility or other things down the track. And I think the cool thing that you mentioned also was like, what's the outcome of each phase? I think sometimes we get so stuck as health professionals in like the how or the what and the process in terms of like, oh, we're going to do exercise or we're going to do manual therapy, but having that outcome specifically, you said for the first piece on clarity, I really love that, because someone who's maybe not clear on what's going on with their own body is going to see that, and they might not know what investigation is, but they understand like, oh, I'm going to get clarity at the end of this on what's
Yeah.
really going on.
Definitely. I feel like so I have looked at a lot of model of care before and I have like done that with every single client of mine to make sure that the model of care is sort of patient centered and the language is for patients, not for health professionals. And a lot of the things and the mistakes that I have to correct normally is to do with the step is all about what they are doing as practitioners.
Mm.
It's not about what the patient experiencing. So I really want to like switch that language to, okay, so what does it look like for the patient and what is the outcome at the end of it? Because that is patient centered. And that will resonate with them a lot more. And so you also want to make sure that your steps of model care is so that you can put your services underneath each step, especially if, let's say, for example, I have in my clinic, we have one-on-one services like physiotherapy. We also have massage therapy, and then we have classes. So we have like Pilates classes and group classes. You want to make sure these services fit under your model of care. And if our motto of care is, manual therapy to movement to maintenance, then maybe the classes fit under the maintenance, and then maybe the mobility stuff fit under physiotherapy. And so if you think about it that way, when I continue to expand my practice, let's say I'm going to go into multidisciplinary practice, and I'm going to hire a psychologist, yeah, or a nutritionist. Do they fit under my current model of care? And if not, what is the rationale for me doing that? Yeah, so it is to get that really clear piece of how we expand as well, and whether it fits under the model of care and the core values behind, this model of care as well.
And whether or not, like, the model still serves the business that is growing and evolving as well, right? Like, I think, if your model was manual therapy movement, it's like, okay, well, where is the mindset piece in there? And maybe that needs to come, before the manual therapy or after, or whatever your philosophy is. So, yeah, I love that, it can obviously be changed and edited, but not just for the sake of it, making sure it's still aligned with the values of the business.
Yes, definitely. And I will say, like, from my two clinics in the background, because one is multidisciplinary and it's a women's health clinic. The other one is purely like physio and is very movement based instead of like multidisciplinary. The two model of care is going to look very different.
Mm.
So it really depends on how you want to build the business, what skill set do you want to bring in. And same for example, if I've got an osteo who is very manual based, um, then their model of care might have to go really deeper into the different phases of um, like outcome from a manual therapist perspective, which is going to be again very different to, for example, my movement lab one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is making sure that patients do understand what is the outcome. And this ties back into also what we look at, a clinical stat called PVA, which is patient visit average. Yeah. Or if you think about the lifetime value of someone, if your model of care, if you can't really prolong your model of care, or you have different steps in your model of care and it's just on one phase, then I'm pretty sure your lifetime value of that client or that patient is also going to be quite small.
And I think this is such a really important point that you've brought up that I'd love to touch on a little bit, because I think, I mean, I work in exercise rehab, and so you kind of, there's an expectation that, you're not going to get better in one session, but I do think that you're probably pushing the harder battle uphill being solely with allied health. Obviously, I work with them too, but it's very much discharge them as soon as possible, just get them pain free. I think that it's changing, but I think that that perception of, well, I don't want to keep patients too long because, that's not potentially what's best for them. I'd love to hear your perspective on that, because obviously this model of care is potentially extending how many sessions they see with you. So how do you, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you maybe shift the mindset of clinic owners or health professionals?
Yeah, I think in the physiotherapy world, it's getting there. Yeah, I think definitely there are different schools of thoughts at the moment, but pulling out of physiotherapy, I think this is to apply to probably um, osteos, massage therapists, where some chiros as well, where they're really focused on the manual therapy side of things, and they say to me, "Oh well, my industry average for PVA is sitting around like 4 to 5, and then we discharge patients." Then my question to them is, okay, well, as a business, you need to prolong someone's lifetime value. If not, then you're just needing to get new patients all the time, and that is very costly for marketing. So can you think about, it's either two things. Either your model of care has to extend so that you're touching on other things outside of manual therapy. Yeah, which also means that maybe we need to upskill and have more tools in our toolkit so that we can address health as a well-being instead of just symptomatic relief. Yeah. So how do we do that? It is the personal upskilling, and also, or maybe if you don't want to upskill on that, is to have other professionals coming in to deliver that service to prolong that patient journey in your business. Yeah. So a couple of ways to look at that. But I do think if you are thinking that you're going to be someone's lifelong therapist, yeah, and you're going to think about my role is to help them with their physical activity and their well-being in general. They're going to see you a lot longer. You're not going to have the mindset of, I just need to fix their lower back pain and that's it. Yeah, it's going to be a lot longer than that because you have all the different goals that you're going to set with them and continuation of keeping them accountable to their new habits and stuff like that. So, it's really the focus of whether you're changing a health behavior or you're just fixing like one symptom and then letting them go.
I think that last bit's a really important thing that I find may help to flip the switch in terms of like, is it symptomatic relief or are you setting this person up for success for the long term? And if time and money was no obstacle, like, do you think you'd get better results with this person by seeing them more often? And most of the times the answer is yes, right? And if the answer is no, then refer them on or find another service. I totally agree with that, right?
Yeah. And also when you start to expand and have a team, like for example, for me, I went from solo to having a team. So when I employ other people, this is where the model of care is really important because you might have junior therapists coming in and they might not be able to hold patients as well. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know and they discharge people really, really soon. But if you have a model of care, at least they know like what is the next step? Oh, I'm stuck. What is the next step? Follow the framework. If you follow the framework, it's going to get you there. And if you follow framework, most of the chances that you don't miss things. Yeah, you're not gonna just fix one thing and then think, "Oh, that's it." You don't know what else to do. So this is really important that you have a framework that you can also teach your team how to deliver that too.
You also mentioned that the framework needs to be visual, which I am so on board with as well. How do you visually represent your framework?
Yeah, so it's hard to do it over a podcast about describing my visual. But actually, it's just going into, okay, understanding the step. So I normally start with a table. Yeah, understand the step. What is the name of that step? And then the outcome. And maybe you have a third column on what does it look like for your team? Yeah, so what is the
Mm.
things that they're doing inside the modalities, for example, that you're addressing? Modalities that you're using and the things that you're addressing. Okay. So then go into Canva after and find a template. It's there's so many different templates on like a flow chart or maybe like a step-to-step thing and start to put things in. Yeah, I think the things that definitely need to put in is the name and the outcome and what you're addressing. Yeah. And then sometimes is when and what do we do is we make that really pretty on brand and then we print it out and actually have it in every single treatment room so that my clinicians can talk to them as they are delivering the treatment. But it's also on the website, it's on the brochures and everything. So you want to make sure that it is definitely on brand. It is, nice to look at and people can see, straight this is to do with design. People can see straight away what is the steps. And if you're going to give this model of care to someone who's a non-health professional or just someone off the street, they should be able to tell you what you're delivering. Yeah, so easy to
I
understand.
like that. That's almost like the fail-proof check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. We just on that in terms of the Canvas stuff, I'm just going to jump in and we are going to put in the show notes. I actually have some templates for pyramids or like arrows that go like 1, 2, 3, 4, or like step ladders and things like that that can visually represent these in different formats.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to use that, then that will be in the show notes for you to grab a free copy from Canva that we've created and obviously just change it to your brand colors and whatever. But I love that, it's very simple. It's like a couple of words, it's the outcome focused and it's in there for them. I thought something that might also be not happy, might also be helpful. Feeling happy today, would be to like run through mine as well. And I'd love if there's any improvements or things from a little selfish perspective that you think that I could change or improve or if it makes sense to you.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Cool. So with Swift Movement Academy, our exercise rehab, we have 3 phases. We don't so much. I kind of have like 2 steps before that, which is focusing on like the complementary like call that we do, which we call our deep dive, and then we have our initial assessment, assessment, which is called our rehab reset. I don't really have a ton in terms of the outcomes for there, but then when they start working with us, we have a 3-step model, which is restore, rebuild, and resilience. So
Good. Yeah.
those are the names. Obviously all R's, keep it
Yeah.
alliteration, but we focus on like the first restore is building foundations, and we have just for people trying to visualize, we have a couple of like tick boxes that we want to check in terms of the outcomes. So we talk about improving mobility restrictions, retraining movement patterns, and building healthy habits. So I would say those are the outcomes for the people. At that stage, that's our first like 12-week block. How does that
Yeah.
sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. To be honest, at the moment you tell me about the names of the 3 stages, I sort of can visualize it.
Already
It's a website, by the way.
It is on my website. I'm like using it for reference so that I don't mess it up.
Which page is it on your website? I'm looking at it. I know there's a podcast, but I love it. Like, oh, if we share screen and stuff, it'll be so much easier because I can like really talk you through. Which page is it on your
Yeah,
website?
give me a second. I'll actually share screen. So if anyone wants to watch this on
Oh, perfect.
YouTube. So this is our restore phase 1. So it's our first 12 weeks. We
Yeah.
talk about building foundations.
Yep.
And then our second phase, which is our next 12 weeks, is rebuild. So we call this the building blocks for success, where we remind them that we're going to retest their metrics, make sure that, everything's improving. We also speak to gradually returning to previously aggravating activities. So something that people are usually nervous with, or they might finish phase 1 and think they're done, and then they go and return to those activities by themselves, but they don't know how to progress beyond pain-free. So that's our phase 2.
Yep. You know what? Some of the outcomes, I like the outcomes. But maybe you can also add like paint the picture for them to what it
In
looks.
terms of, like, what they get. Yeah, okay. Because I did
Yeah.
kind of talk to, like, what they're doing, not the outcome of.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So these are like I would paint a picture and then under that it will be, you know, instead of like retest your mobility and strength metrics is maybe like maintain your mobility and strength, or maybe like it's like improve your strength while maintaining your mobility.
So that you can get back to your sport or whatever it is.
Yeah, so that you can return to previously aggravating activities, and then progress from there. But yeah, yeah, of course you need to think about the marketing message, but yeah, paint the picture for them so they know what it feels like and what it looks like.
It's so funny you say that because I say this to my students all the time, and they're probably listening to this laughing at me being like, "Ha! Taste of your own medicine." Um, but I think sometimes we need someone else to, like, cross-reference and check our work too.
Well, yes, definitely. I would love you to get feedback on my model as well. But anyway,
Yeah, we'll have to do that after. Yeah, yeah. So resilience is our third phase. So this is where we talk, it's 6 to 12 months, and this is, again, like maintenance to avoid re-injury we speak to, and we talk about resilience through strength and conditioning principles. But I read that now and I'm like, shit, that's the what we're doing, not the outcome. So I'm already like self-checking before I get graded by the guru.
yeah, your outcome is bulletproofing your body. But again, what does it mean? Um,
Yeah,
yeah, that is a bit vague. So maybe like again, like paint the picture for them.
yeah.
But
Okay.
resilience, but yeah, like I completely understand all those things. Maintenance. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. Love that. Thank you.
Well, my model for Movement Lab is actually really similar.
I mean, there's so many different ways you can say very similar things, I would assume.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Um,
But that's great.
let me just have a look. Yeah, it is really similar. We have the couple of R's as well. It's like restore, re-educate.
We're so cool.
Same thing. Same minds.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Well, on the same path, um, to flip into a different gear now, which I guess is kind of along the lines of why we create this model of care or signature system, whatever each of us call it, is obviously to help get better patient results for the longer term rather than like this quick fix approach. And the win-win side of that as a business is obviously increasing your profits, your lifetime value. But I wanted to talk specifically to hybrid models because I think we're both fans of these, and some people probably don't maybe use the same lingo as we do or know what that means. So, when you think a hybrid model for a clinic, and I can maybe talk to like the online space, but what is that for your clinics who are maybe just not doing that and they're doing just one-to-one or they still have some group stuff? How do you implement a hybrid model and what is it for the people you work with?
Yeah. I think back to the profit side of things first. Like, this is probably the reason why we go into hybrid. In allied health, the profit margin is quite tight. Yeah. And I would say, especially in my industry, physio, which is probably the same for a lot of other allied health industries that have the same model and the same pricing and the same wages. Yeah. It is quite tight. And I think the average of like 10 to 15 is really common, which I
The
think
profit
is
margin percentage.
too low. Yes, is way too low. Like, if you look
For
at
all the effort that you're putting in, you may as well work for yourself and just make 2 to 300 grand a year and be done with it.
and it's I know, I know. So it's really like, for me, that is just not worthwhile. And I'm really trying to push for like any brick and mortar allied health business with one-on-one has to be around the 25% margin. But to take it beyond that, it is hard just because then you have your overheads and your expenses, you have your outgoings, especially wages, which also have to increase as well. And then your price is not increasing fast enough to cater for those. So, which is why we need to think about like other ways of pulling in revenue that doesn't involve us to either hire more people or rent more space all the time. And so hybrid is one of the ways to do it. It is providing group programs so that you can charge like it's a higher ticket transaction so that you're not just charging like, 150 per consult and you're charging like over a grand or 2 grand per transaction. Yeah.
So when you say per transaction, do you mean like from the, let's say, 10 people doing it all together, they would pay less than a one-on-one, but you get more for the same work?
Yes. So it depends on how you want to do that. So for example, a hybrid program could be $2,500. Yeah. And within that, you will have some, like for a brick and mortar business, because you have a physical location, you will have some one-on-ones in there, but you might not. If let's say you're going to think about a patient, you normally will see them for 12 sessions in the clinic. Maybe the one-on-ones, you only have 4 sessions or 5 sessions. Yeah. But then you will still have good outcome or even better outcome because you're supplementing it with other things. For example, online, online education and online, step to step whole program that can bring them through. Because most of the time you'll find that like there are things that are universal to most patients of the same condition or the same niche or the same symptoms, right? There are things that you always bring them through. So those things you can definitely take out of your one-on-ones and make sure that you put them into a group program, an online version of it. So it can be like videos, audios, like with supplementary master classes, whatever that you want to bring in. And so your one-on-one is more focus on the coaching side, making sure that they're accountable for it, making sure that you give them the tailored stuff when you're seeing them one-on-one to guide them through and that they're progressing nicely. So it is to try and achieve the same health outcome, but in a different way. Yeah. So your one-on-ones are still there. You have a group program. You have, because you have more time since you're not delivering so many one-on-ones, you can actually do some group coaching and group accountability groups as well so that you can build a community expert, which is also really good at keeping people accountable for their health outcome, is when they have friends that are doing it with them or they build the relationship groups that they can progress together. Yeah. So then for you, it's facilitating and monitoring those things. So it's very much like if you think about an online health program, which I know that you do teach people how to build an online health program. It is just taking that, which profit margin normally is a lot higher. Like I've seen 50, 60%, that's completely possible. And merge into the allied health brick and mortar model to have an average of profit margin to go higher than the 25% to be 30, 35, 40. So when you do the maths and the calculations, the 40% is definitely easy to get to.
And so just a couple of things to clarify on that I was thinking. When you said at first, as the example, it's like 2,500 for the hybrid model, that's someone who's committing to complete the hybrid model, which includes the one-on-ones and the group stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, one-on-one group stuff, like we have our program at 4 months, and then if they want to continue, they can. on a different package.
Yeah.
And also, we want to provide value. So, how do you create like high value healthcare? In the program, we have different types of learning. So, you have, your audio, your video,
I
some
love that.
exercise classes and stuff like that. So, people, because we are targeting menopause women, so sometimes they don't want to like sit in front of the computer and look at the whole video and stuff like that. That someone do like listening to audio on the run. So, we want to just cater for different learning styles. We have your one on ones, and because we're a multidisciplinary clinic, the one-on-ones that depends on their assessment of
Mm,
how so we tailor it to whoever is the clinician that will take care of this patient depends on the assessment results that they bring back in. Yeah, so it is still tailored in a sense. And then it also includes in-person clinical Pilates weekly.
awesome. I was going to ask that. Is your group stuff in clinic or online? Do you have an option for like online
Yeah.
exercise as well?
Yeah, so there is an option online, and if we're going to bring this national and have other clinics as not affiliates, but as
Like
what do you call it?
prob-
Like a satellite clinic. Yeah, so that they can do the one-on-ones or they can do the in-person things and follow the online stuff for our model, then that is a way that we can sort of nationalize this program that we have.
I love that. And I love so much that you've thought about the different learning styles because you're right. Like, we as business owners might be the ones who are like sitting at our desk and we're happy to consume that, but we are not necessarily our consumer. And so understanding that just people in general have different learning styles, but also our consumer, menopause, maybe they're, still working full time and doing all these things and running around with, teenage children or whatever. So they make a podcast set to me sounds like a perfect option for people who want to still consume that, but aren't going to prioritize sitting down for like an hour and watching a masterclass or something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like for menopause women especially, like this doesn't apply to some industries. So for psych is very different, psychologist. But for menopause women in a physio environment, they actually like to do things together. So which is why a cohort base is really good. Sometimes you can do it more like an evergreen enrollment that people can come in anytime and they just follow through. But for us, we really want to push out the community aspect. So we do a cohort sign up, which means it's a set launch period, a set delivery period. And so we know exactly when to expect what for the business. So different ways of delivering the program.
Yeah. I've done both models with my business in terms of like launching and whatnot. And I think, yeah, I guess because most of our programs tend to be 12 months, they do tend to create that community anyway. But, I have found when there's like shorter, more intensive commitments or programs, that community aspect can be really helpful. And I can imagine how powerful it is to be in person as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like another thing is when you're creating a program, so sorry, for like, for example, a health clinic wanting to start creating a program, it is to really understand how does that fit into your model of care. Or like you don't want a program that is in competition to your other services. So you're actually just creating like decision paralysis. Yeah,
Mm.
for your audience. So it has to speak to especially like either one, like within your model of care, either one face of it. Yeah. Or maybe you think about what is the outcome? What is the call to action, right? At the end of it. Is it that it feeds into your one-on-one services? Or maybe it replaces a one-on-one so that you can service more people. Yeah. Or maybe it's to do with people that have a wait list and they need to triage patients and just provide a service before they get into the clinic. So it's really important to understand where does it stand within your whole business model.
Mm.
Yeah. Especially for those who are running clinics. I think for your audience, if they're just having the program and that is their business, then that will be quite different.
Yeah, I think for the coaches who are, like, scaling online and don't have their own, like, rent-based model or whatever, profit margins are already going to be higher. Um, I mean, pros and cons to each, right? But, with scaling online, there's probably less like face-to-face community. And so there are different challenges in terms of creating that community online or potentially even bringing people together for certain days and things where they can connect, if that is even like relevant for them. Like, I'm just thinking totally left of field. Like, if you were doing something based on like like an online program for like personal finances, maybe it's fine that it's not community based, right? Like not everything people are wanting to like share and open up and necessarily need that. But um I think having the option to, particularly in healthcare and when people are going through similar things like you're all doing with women with menopause. Like I have a client who works specifically with women who've experienced domestic violence. So it's like that community aspect, I think, is really powerful for them too. Question I have for you is, if someone doesn't have a hybrid model, how would you go about implementing this and then pricing it compared to the other things that you have? Let's say if you're just doing like one on one at the moment.
That's a big question. Exception on the pricing bit. Um, yeah. So for me, I think if you are running a health clinic already and that you are creating a program as a complementary service, yeah, which is not your main business, yeah, then it is only worthwhile to create something that is high ticket because then you can run ads to it and then it can help you to get lead gen like on automation instead of like you need to market it all the time because they have other things to market in the business. Yeah. So that's why I always like, okay, if people are wanting to start a health program, the pricing bit is we want to understand, well, it has to be like from my audience, I would say over $1,000 and best if it's over $2,000 because it makes everything a lot easier afterwards. And you probably will know that too. Like to create a program, to launch it, to set up all the things that need to like build the automations behind it is almost the same for a low ticket and a high ticket program. And it's much easier to sell a high ticket program after a while when you have all the assets there, because you can run things in automation. So I would think is okay, if I decide to run a high ticket program, yeah, let's go pricing to start with. Let's say I want to run something that's $1,500 and I'm currently just providing like a one-on-one service. What do I have to put into the program to provide the value that people will pay $1,500 for? Yeah. So then that will be a starting point to what are the inclusions that you're going to put in? Do I put in one-on-one? Do I put in anything tailored? Do I put in like maybe tailored assessment bundle in there? Or is it just everything group? Because I think if everything is just group or just online, then you have a high competition with other people who are doing it as a sole business. So all the online health practitioners who are having like really, really good health programs out there, you can't compete with them because they are doing it as the main business and you're doing it as a side hustle.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I talk about this all the time. I'm like, you are not Lorna Jane or like Kayla It Signs, and you cannot afford to do like a $10 or $15 a week program. That's just not feasible. And so I think, the thing that we can compete on if we don't have an incredibly large audience and, team behind us and I mean like dozens and dozens of team members just working on this one thing, then I think high ticket is absolutely the way to go with this. Um, and so you mentioned like running ads to this. My initial thought when we spoke about this was thinking that I would get current clients into this maybe after like a block of one-on-one, or maybe it's included, right? They sign up and it's like, okay, everyone now goes on this hybrid model. And obviously it's in the name hybrid. So there's going to be some elements of one-on-one and some of like group or DIY style or done with you style. Um, do you only run ads to this and keep it kind of separate from your current clients, or is there a pathway where they also can work towards joining this program too?
Yeah. So there are two pathways. One is for our current clients. Yeah. Where if we're in the consultation room with them and we do think that they fit the eligibility criteria and that the program is going to make it better for them in terms of the experience and the health outcome, then we will just ask them like right there and then whether they want to transition to the program. Yeah. And be clear on the inclusion so that they can decide, make a decision. If they don't want to go to the program, they stick to our one-on-ones, just like any other clinic. Okay. But at the same time is we also want to like as a product, you can use it for lead gen, right? So we also run it outside with ads as well to attract newcomers. So the way that we run it is like we don't put the program in the ad. Yeah. So we just run it like a
We're
lead.
not putting the price up. You are definitely showing the value first. Let's be clear.
So it is like a lead magnet funnel. Yeah. So for example, a menopause program, it is really we have a lead magnet for menopause women who want to talk about like microbiomes, vagina microbiomes and gut microbiomes. Yeah. So we have a lead magnet to get them to download that. And then we have an email funnel to talk about, to transition into introducing the program in our clinic to them. Then we have like a little masterclass at the end of that. And then, yeah, that's part of the enrollment process.
Okay, cool. So it's multifaceted. It's not just the ads. You also obviously have that
Well, yeah,
section.
you need a whole lot of things in there to complement the ad. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I would say, like I haven't done a ton with paid ads. It's definitely something for 2025 for me to dive deeper onto. But one thing that I do at the moment is just literally like the current and past leads and current clients as well, and having a look at even like that as a different either option for them or like a downgrade or I call it like a backdoor sell. So like let's say like ideally you give them your like gold standard and you just show them that and you show them the options. For us it might be like once or twice a week in person. Those are the options, and if they're like, okay, that's not going to work but I really want to work with you, then you can show them your hybrid model, which might be like once a month in person and a full program for the rest of the month. So you just getting that touch point for the reassessment, and you're checking in on them a little more frequently. But I guess the reason why I don't often offer or get our clients to offer hybrids up front is because I think that they're going to get the best results with initially having some sort of like period where we get them to prove to us that they can be consistent and they can follow it, and therefore they're going to get good results on the hybrid model versus just jumping straight into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also like it depends on the design of your program and how you start people on the journey. So for our people, we definitely triage based on like a breakthrough call with them. So we have a free call. So we already understand their expectations, what they have tried before, and like the current health habits. Yeah. If they're quite poor in terms of like following through with things, then we definitely prime them a lot. They can still go to the hybrid because we have a lot of things in there that will just keep them going. Um, but to start with, in the hybrid, we actually start with the one-on-ones. So we start with the assessment bundle and then a Loom video sent back to them to tell them this is a treatment plan based on your assessment. And our assessment has pathology test, all the like national questionnaires and all of that for a lot of screening so that we know what is the outcome that they want to get and the pathway. And then we have the practitioner filming like a Loom video to talk about that and just make them feel welcomed and that I'm your main point of contact. And then we book in all the classes and all the one-on-ones right there and then so that we know that this person needs to always have these checkpoints with us.
Mm.
So they can't actually be like flaky.
Yeah, no, well, I think that's the purpose of a hybrid, right? Yeah, the purpose of a hybrid is there's some one-on-one and there's some group or DIY or whatever included. And I should probably clarify what I was saying before in terms of like some of the programs that I have that people will start in a hybrid, but because it's a hybrid, that is exactly like you said, that one-on-one element. And that also doesn't mean that any of it for what I'm doing has to be in person either.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can do like it'd be pretty common knowledge in terms of like PTs do check-ins online, right? Like it's a very common thing. So you can still do one-on-ones and have your entire business model online, but just with a hybrid model, as opposed to like programming only or something that's like super DIY, which is totally that's like kind of that low ticket we were talking about, that like really a whole different business model. And I think people don't see it like that. I think people see it as like, oh, it's just a downgrade, it'll be fine. But you have to have more clients, and the more volume that you have, like the more problems that you have because there's more people, and typically they're the ones who are paying the least, who are the most like messaging about every single dollar and where it's going. And you still get well, I would say you probably get more like admin time and like client management time when you have lower ticket versus if you can have a couple $1,000s at least to really support people. And then I think that that warrants, unless it's like a really, really crazy good program, I think for most people starting out, that warrants it being hybrid and including some elements of individualization or personalized support.
Yeah. I think that the main reason why we start the hybrid, apart from like the numbers side of things, is also we genuinely believe that that is high value care. Yeah. And it doesn't take away, just because you take away the one on one, it doesn't mean that is the people's
Valuable.
outcome is going to be less.
Mm.
And so I would question, for example, if you have a lower ticket program where you don't actually, where it's all just DIY, yeah, I would question, are you sure and you certain that people's health outcomes are like they're getting the outcomes that you want them to get? Like, so you need to check your completion rates, whether people are actually going through all the videos that you have, and do you have any questionnaires to understand what is the outcome, the transformation? That is going to be really good marketing material as well, right? Like if you have people and you have surveys and testimonials and like solid quantifiable outcome, that can become your marketing for the program eventually. And so, yeah, it's putting those elements in, and you do have to have more touch points, I think, to make sure that people do have that health outcome at the end.
And especially if that's like you're trying to transition or add this in and all you've done is one-on-one. It's like you see someone every week. Like the likelihood they're going to get their outcomes is pretty high because they have that commitment and that accountability. And then going to even a hybrid, like I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Like it's harder to get people results. And I think that that's why having those touch points and that opportunity to sort of pull them back in and redirect them on course is so important, and why I think this hybrid model is probably honestly here to stay, because people don't necessarily need like you hand holding them every single step of the way, and all that, typically one-on-one for the same amount is probably going to cost them more. But they can get, like you said, better outcomes when they're in a group and they can surround themselves with peers. They also get all this extra education that you couldn't possibly fit into, one physio session, let alone anything that you're going to do, outside of that. So I definitely think that this model is here to stay. And I think the thing that I took away from today is like, how can I potentially make sure that the value that I'm giving is digestible in a way that my clients can choose what works for them. So when you said like making it podcast based or something like that, so that it's like a private podcast and they can listen to it rather than watch it. Because I think we need to remember being client centric and what's the best value for them, not like the easiest option for you.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? When people are creating programs, and this is a hybrid or online or whatever, right? I think most of the times they put in too much, like right there and then. They put in too much, and it's actually not, it's either not digestible content, or especially a health professional, sometimes they put in content that is just theory based and it doesn't really link to why people need to do that. Yeah. So
Mm.
I always think about, okay, when you create the program, is what are the action steps that people actually need to take, your patients need to take in order to achieve that health outcome. And so then your theory that goes in needs to justify why they need to take that action or talk more about the action. Yeah. But it's not about, like, for example, menopause and hormone changes. I can have a whole like 20 minutes lecture on the hormonal changes, but then you still have to link it back to why they need to do those things instead of just providing that knowledge, because people don't just consume. And then, like, if someone wants to read a book, there's so many books out there, right? The reason they don't want to read those books and they want to commit to you is because you can deliver that message in a different way to get them to action. So just thinking about that. And that also comes to another point where when we design the programs and start to build programs, I actually build it with a first cohort. So I don't build a program and sell it.
I do the exact same thing. I feel like everyone who has mastered this is like
Yeah.
market, sell, create.
Yes, definitely. I will create maybe the first 3 modules, great, and then I will create the rest at the same time when I'm delivering the first, to the first cohort so that I get feedback straight away, and that will help you to understand what do you actually need to create and how people learn.
I love that. It reminds me, oh my God, the very first time I created a course, you're gonna cringe at this. I was like, okay, we're doing 3 hours a week for 26 weeks straight, no weeks off. And I was like, it'll be fine. Because this was for other health professionals. I was like, they'll be fine. This is their like PD. And I was like, oh, people want to take a holiday and not do something for a week. And then 3 hours becomes 6 hours in the following week. And then I got like gastro and I had to like pause the whole program because I couldn't do it for 1 week. And so I think the key point from that you sort of brought up is that like volume doesn't equal value.
Oh, definitely.
It's really important. Like in terms of I was trying to just give so much content. And yes, there was practical things in there too, but that was like on top of all the other things. And so instead I find that, like we are in the TikTok era of 1 minute videos. So creating something for 30 minutes and expecting someone's going to sit there and watch that as opposed to look at it and go, oh my God, I have to dedicate 30 minutes to this. Even if it's the same thing, like micro dosing people on your education, I think is gives them the dopamine. It helps them move forward. They feel like they're progressing. So that's a great little tip that you added in there in terms of making sure that it's digestible content that has an action item and a clear outcome linked back to the education that you may be providing them.
Yeah. The videos has to be 10 minutes max. So when I create them, it has to be 10 minutes. If you have something that is like much longer, then break it into like 10 minutes videos. So it's at least like bite-sized. It has to have a script to with it, like a transcript with it, or it has to have subtitles because we have a lot of women that actually like look at things at bedtime, for example, and then the rest of the house is quiet, so they don't actually put on the audio. Um, yeah, but definitely. I think it's interesting how like health this is especially for health professionals. Sometimes I feel like because we charge based on time,
Mm.
like on default, yeah, we provide time and they pay us for time. So I feel like sometimes when we go into the group model, we're still thinking in that way where, okay, the more time I give them, the more I can charge them. Cool. So if I want to charge a high ticket, I'm just going to give them a lot of time without thinking that, oh, I'm actually overwhelming people with the information that I give. And that people don't actually want to spend that long time with you. They want to get to the outcome in the quickest time possible. So your goal, you need to flip that mindset to see how you can provide that value in the quickest, shortest time possible, bite-sized.
Totally, totally. So I say this to my students all the time. I'm like, hey, like imagine if I charge you the exact same amount for the 12-month course that we usually have, but I get you a result in like a week. Like you'd still be willing to pay what you pay, if not far more, because you have accelerated a year's worth of progress and time is money. So you've gotten there quicker and we can accelerate those goals. So oh, so many golden nuggets. I definitely can't keep you too much longer. I know that you're a busy woman and we already had to reschedule this. So the last thing that I would love to do before we jump off today is get what we do as a closing tradition. One piece of actionable advice that you could give a coach who is looking to maybe implement a hybrid model or their own model of care. Um, what would you recommend that their next step is?
So if you don't have a model of care, create your model of care like right now, because regardless of one-on-one or one-to group, you have to have your model of care as a business. That's number one. And second is if you do want to go into hybrid, definitely do it. But hybrid or group program, same thing. Yeah? I think definitely do it and have a strategic plan behind it to understand how you're going to allocate time. Because sometimes, like in the background of doing and creating a program, you need time to create the program to start with. And I would normally say that even if you're not creating it all before you sell, you still need to have some assets ready to go when you launch. And so give it around that 60 hours mark time, um, which is depending on how much time you've got. And that would say, like, if someone is like full schedule of one-on-one all the time and you're the person delivering, you need to actually carve out time so that you can sort of start another income stream in your business.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
and I think that's really important.
yeah, I think that's so I mean 60 hours, I mean depending on what you're creating could be less, could be more, but I definitely do think that we do have to sacrifice in the short term if we want like 5-10 years from now, if you do want to have a model that you is not attached to your hourly rate all the time, it is so important that you start it sooner rather than later. And I'm just so grateful for my like 25-year-old self that I was just like, fuck it, let's do it. And I just like didn't really think about it. Now I'm sitting here at 31 being like, oh my goodness, like imagine if like thank God I did that. So I feel like if you haven't done that, the time is now uh to execute on that. And again, just remembering in the show notes, we're going to put that signature system template from Canva that you guys can have access to. Oh, thank you so much, Winnie. If people want to reach out to you or have any questions, or potentially they have a clinic and they are allied health female led practices and maybe want your support, where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, which is theclinicproject.com, or on my Instagram, which is theclinicproject.winnie. Yeah. I've also actually have, you know how you have a model of care templates, right? I have a success handbook for patients template on Canva as well. Can I share that too?
Yeah,
Basically, that is
absolutely.
to
Would
put
love.
your model of care inside, and then it has also other things that you can put in your onboarding emails for PT patients, or like PTs or clinics, that you can prime your patients to know what to expect when they first get to you. And so it's like a whole handbook, um, yeah, that talks about you and your model of care and your core values, and that I think will be really helpful too.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your resources and your brain today. Um, I'm sure we will talk very soon. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll cross paths again. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Hey, coach, before you go, the reason I do this every single week and the reason we've been able to surpass 100 episodes is because of you. So thank you. We're on a mission towards never seeing another coach leave the industry because they didn't have the skills or the confidence to scale. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that before you forget. I read every single one of the comments and share as many as I can. So if you found this episode valuable, sharing it with a friend who might be able to benefit from hearing it would honestly mean so much to me. Until next time, and in whatever you do, move swiftly.